Well, look, somebody's decided to take their ball and go home. Well, hi there. My name's Charles Ray Dawson. I'm the Associate Broker Residential Sales Manager at ProStar Realty. This is the Unnamed Real Estate Podcast, episode 235. And I think the sellers are leaving. So, oh my God. My cup runneth over. I got so much great stuff to talk about today. And, this is one of those days. Some weeks I'm sitting there going, what am I going to talk about? And then other days I get all sorts of good stuff. So, starting off yesterday, Wednesday, I was going through the numbers and stuff. And every once in a while, I document the numbers Wednesday morning at near to 9 o'clock as I can, all right? For those who just haven't been following, I think Wednesday morning is probably the quietest time on the MLS. Anything that's gone under contract that was shown on the weekend has pretty much been wrapped up around then. The new listings haven't come on because they tend to come on Thursdays and Fridays. You're always going to have some noise, but that seems to be the best, most accurate time. And I could have picked anything, any day, as long as I was consistently checking. And I'm doing a pretty good job of that. Once or twice, it's like, it's Thursday, crap, and try to back up some stuff. And usually I call that out. So we're having some movement again, and we're having a lot of different articles go on. And this is fun, okay? Because when Cromford is talking about stuff the next day after my video drops, I really sort of like, wow, is Tina stalking me? Woo, that gets me all excited. But, last week I was talking about that show where they're talking, foreclosure spiking. And sure enough, I talk about it, go, no, this is what's actually going on. And the very next day, Cromford Report has a little article saying, no, they're moving, but they're not spiking. All right. Pretty much everything I said last episode. So, God, I love it when the experts agree with me, especially when I say it first and then the experts agree with me. And that makes me feel like I could have done something with my life, if my parents had actually told me what my IQ was, instead of telling you you're lazy and you're not living up to your potential, actually shown me my potential and said, you could be here. Because every kid gets told, you could do better, Johnny. No, Johnny can't, right? Johnny's been eating glue since the kindergarten. He's now a junior in high school and he's still packing a bottle of Elmer's in his lunchbox, right? Johnny's not going anywhere, all right? But I could have been a contender, Charlie. But I have no idea why I went off on that whole thing. But like I said, it's really nice when I sit there and I work up my own hypothesis, and then it gets reaffirmed by the smart people in the room who actually get paid lots of money to say what I just told you guys a week earlier. And I give this away for free. All right, so let's go through Cromford first, right? Now, there was an article that came out, okay, and it was U.S. housing prices falling, what to know, all right? And reviewing the article, Cromford linked to this thing, it covered a lot of it. Now remember, articles are national. Phoenix is local. I deal in Phoenix, right? And Phoenix being Phoenix, it's not a one-for-one comparison on that, right? But their thing right there is that, talking house prices are starting to drop throughout the country. All right. And we're seeing that tightening of the market, right? Which means the buyers now have the power, all right, if they know how to utilize it. And that reflects, in a way, on the numbers I'm going to get to you in a bit. But a couple of things that they're talking about, all right, is that high income sectors that typically drive new home purchases, information, financial activities, and professional business services are experiencing the steepest job losses right now. Well, it's because a lot of those jobs are being replaced by AI. Okay, people are burrowing down on that. Okay, and now none of these professional business services, information, financial life, none of these should be impacted by the tariffs, right? But we're still seeing a contraction in those economies, right? Are we in a recession? Are we moving into a recession? Well, 3% drop, GDP growth last quarter says we're not. Okay, but then one day after the Fed meets, and says, oh, we're really worried about inflation. We suddenly see inflation in job numbers. All right. Why didn't the Fed just say, hey, we're going to hold off for a day? We're going to hold off for 2 days. We're going to wait to see what these two organizations say, and then we'll make our decision. Almost. If you had that kind of incompetency in anything but the federal government, people would be fired. All right. So this research team, okay, is the big thing, that they came up with, and this is from John Mackey and Danielle Nguyen. All right. I'm saying Nguyen because it's a Vietnamese name, and I do believe that's how you translate that out. I don't speak Vietnamese. For home buyers, a shift creates opportunities for those with stable jobs. More inventory motivated sellers mean better negotiating power. How long ago have I been saying that? All right. And for the home sellers, entry-level home sellers must meet the payment requirements of the first-time home buyers, and move-up and luxury home sellers must consider the buyer's need to sell their current home. All right. And then I also mentioned that the Bay Area has seen the highest reduction in new home prices, down 5% compared to a year ago. All right. And they are the leader. So if San Francisco area is leading with a 5% drop on the new home builds, yeah, we're going down, but it's not the sky falling or anything like that. Like people really keep wishing would happen. So let's go to the numbers, and I want to show you what kicked off this, why I think sellers are starting to taking their ball and they're going home. All right. So here are the numbers for July 30th, 2025. Actually, you know what? I forgot. I did not change that. That is actually, watch me do this on the fly, boys and girls. I was too busy reviewing the numbers to pay any attention to what I was actually doing. There we go. Look at that. And then, of course, I knock it out of the scope. There we go. Get there. All right, done. Okay, August 6th, 2025. Actives this week were 23,643. Now, that's down 463. But our new listings were 1,984, which is up 218. Contracts were up from last week, 134 to 2,191, and our closings were 1,721. Coming soon to an MLS near you are 489 new listings. But let's look at the Cromford Report numbers because this is where it gets fun. Supplies dropped to 101.2. Right? Demand ticked up just a little bit. Okay, it was 75.8 last week, and now it's 75.9. Okay, but the overall change moved the Cromford Report number up to 75. So what threw off my first thought is that, hey, actives are down 463. Right? We get 281 in their new ones. Okay, but we had 134 more properties go under contract than prior. What gives? All right. Now, there are two numbers that I do not track, but I pay attention to. And these are the canceled and expired. You're not going to see them in this chart, so you're going to have to listen. All right. Canceled last week were 600 listings, and expired were 570 listings. Remember this chart right here that I was talking about to you last week, the listing success rate. All right. Cancels and expireds show up here. This is where we see that coming down. All right. I really think, especially with the canceled, okay, cancels are more than expired. Canceled is when a buyer or seller decides he no longer or she no longer works with their particular agent. You had 120 days. Why haven't you sold my house yet? All right. So having canceled and expires hit about 1,170. Okay, so we had, think of that. They all came off this active column. So we lost 1,170, and then we add back the 218 and the 234. All right. So why does a seller let a listing expire instead of renewing with their agent? All right. And why does a seller fire an agent? Okay. Well, in both cases, the blame is on the agent. Now, whether or not the agent actually did anything wrong, okay, is beyond the point, beside the point. And so it's not even in the same room as the point, okay? The agent is ultimately at fault in the eyes of the consumer. All right. So if the agent took a listing at a higher price than the market supported, that house is going to sit there. Right? At the end of the day, he couldn't get my house sold. Right? Now, that being said, there are a couple sellers out there who are just straight up honest. I want $750 for this house. If I don't get $750 for it, it's not worth it for me to sell. I'm going to hold on to it. And you run 180 days, all right, with that listing sitting out there. Okay. And then it cancels and it shows up on your permanent record as did not sell this house. All right. Sometimes it's, it's consideration of, I want 170, all right, I want $750. I want whatever my imaginary price is because the house next door went for it. And the house next door is the exact same floor plan. We were built in this the same year in 1971. All right, and you're sitting there trying to explain to Gladys, all right, you have two houses. That house was built in 1971. Your house was built in 1971. Right? In 1991, they replaced their roof. You replaced your roof in 2001, right? After the flood. All right. And then when they replaced, in 2001, when you were replacing your roof, they updated the kitchen. You kept the same. Right now we're 24 years after that, they've put a brand new roof on because it's time for a new roof, updated the air conditioner. You're still running with a 50-year-old swamp cooler. They're not the same house anymore. Same floor plan, same square footage, same builder. All right. But you're no longer a comp. All right. That's no longer a comp because it's a different house. But Gladys doesn't care. All she knows is the house next door went for $750 and she wants $750. All right. That is another reason why these things fall out. Sometimes you just got the wrong house in the wrong market. Right? Sometimes you just got a house that is so unique, that people in that price point really can't buy it. Whatever the case may be. Sometimes it's a bad flip. Right? I walked into a flip and realized, the husband and wife team decided they wanted to flip a house and the wife got to decorate. And she made the perfect house for her and her very eclectic Saltillo tile and Southwestern design. And she hadn't stenciled saguaro cactuses on the bedroom wall right behind the bed with a little hoot owl peering out at you. All right. Because she thinks that's adorable. Somebody's going to love this house. Yeah, somebody does. You. Nobody else did. So, but when you see these failed houses and these houses starting to come off the market, all right, that house potentially was going to sell. They at least thought the idea, hey, I want to sell this house. It just, whatever reason, the numbers did not add up, and the buyers did not agree with them with what that was going to happen. And sometimes the agent just sucked. Came in too high a price, thinking that later on the buyer would come down. The house got stale. They've never done an open house. They've never marketed it. They've never done the listing reports. They haven't done anything to put that house out there, and they're not doing reverse prospecting. All right. All sorts of things. So you have an agent like that, it's like, wow. Wouldn't have happened with a ProStar agent. Because at about day 45, your sales manager's giving you a call and going, hey, what's going on with that property out there? What are you doing with it? All right, what are you doing to try to get that sold? All right, what's your marketing like? Where'd you get those pictures? Who did you use? Oh, you used your iPhone. What year is your iPhone? Okay, take that iPhone 3 and pitch it. Get something with a decent camera. Go online, watch about an hour and a half of how to take digital photography. Right, and try to redo those pictures. I mean, this kind of stuff, right? So let's go on with the rest of the numbers and whatnot, because I do want to cover, hey, remember, Cromford reporting numbers starting to track back up. And remember, last month we had 10. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We now have 11 neighborhoods and cities that are starting to increase and move more towards the seller side. All right. Maricopa dropped under Buckeye. Remember I said that they were really close. Maricopa is now at the bottom at 49.7. There's your deals, boys and girls. All right. But our buyer's market area now is Maricopa, Buckeye, Surprise, Queen Creek, Peoria, Goodyear, Tempe. All right. Our balanced markets right now are Gilbert, Mesa, Phoenix, Scottsdale, Avondale, Glendale, Cave Creek. And our Sellers markets are Fountain Hills, Chandler, and Paradise Valley. Because look at Paradise Valley. They only got like 90 houses for sale in Paradise Valley. All right, that's half their problem. They don't have inventory because they're a very small, very rich town. All right, but good time to be rich. All right, Chandler's up at 114.5. They are up out of the balance and into a seller's market again. And Fountain Hills still holding on, but if they drop another point, they're going to be in balance. All right, but Cave Creek, wow. Over the last month, they've gone from 90.6, just holding on to the bottom rung of a balanced market. All right, now they're up to 106. That is a huge swing in Cave Creek. All right, so, So, is it done? Is this the ending of the buyer's market? Remember, I always say national news tends to lag behind. All right. We do see, looking at our Cromford report numbers. All right. We do see, buyers are starting to tick up a little bit more. If we ever got a redone in interest rates, and I haven't talked to anybody about interest rates this week, we might actually be able to have some sort of more rush, but still a good time to be a buyer. I mean, seriously, even the national news is picking up on that now. Right? So, speaking of national news, the other thing I wanted to cover, I will include this page in the show notes below in my great scouring of the interwebs, okay, when I'm not looking for various Sydney Sweeney memes or anything like that. Occasionally stuff pops up on my board about real estate. And it was a series of charts, and it was a really great article. Okay, I liked this article. Give me just a second. This is an old group that used to be called the Second Foundation Partners. Now they call themselves Percent. Anyways, it's fiatnews.com, August 07, 2025, the housing market truth and 5 cool charts. All right. And I love charts. I love charts. So this was written, by Matt Ziegler. He's a managing director and private wealth advisor with Sunpoint Investments. Okay. And he's helping them form up this site. And they used an article with a economist from Redfin. All right. And it is, what they're trying to do is they're trying to take, business and economic concepts and put them into storyboards. All right. And then follow along with the storyboards so you can make things a little bit easier to understand the world around you. Okay. The world's not supposed to be so opaque. All right. And so I'm going through these charts, and she explains what each one of these charts does, and it's a great article, a little counterintuitive, and that's my favorite kind of stuff. All right, give me the stuff that triggers, that little bit of whoa, cognitive dissonance kicks in. It's my favorite emotion. All right, I just don't experience that much anymore because I know everything, but and one of these, I'll just go through these charts and explain why you need to actually read this article. All right, so. Chart number 1. Come on. The great housing power flip. Okay. What she's doing on this is she's actually tracking the news articles. Okay. And how the narrative of the news articles change. All right. In this particular case, looking at it, your 2 colors, orange and blue, is orange if the articles reflect that it's a buyer's market, and blue is whether or not it reflects it's a seller's market. Okay. And this one right here says that before 2021, all right, any housing news is being framed as a seller's, as part of a seller's market story. It was framed as part of a seller's market story, all right? And that can be kind of stuff like Gladys bought this house back in 1971, and all of a sudden she got $750,000 for it. This is a seller's market, and she didn't have to pay any commission. All right, and the next one of this now, in 2015, the same housing dynamics are now being told as a buyer's market narrative, all right? Now, I would argue about that, the dynamics, all right? But, that's... And when I see something like that, that's when I'm reading the article. All right, next one I wanted to show you. Climate change hits Wallace before headlines. This was a fun one, okay? Pre-2020 2024 insurance cost increases weren't connected to housing affordability stories. Now are central to housing crisis narratives, all right? Now, insurance costs are killing housing affordability. You heard it here first a couple months ago when I started calling out how much of that three-legged stool, because remember, three-legged stool, all right, of household home affordability, the price, the interest rates, and the carrying costs, all right, the upkeep, the insurance, right, that third leg. This entire article is about that third leg I was talking about, right? Because in this case, it's balanced towards, all right, because of climate change, insurance costs are coming up because Florida has never had a hurricane before 2024. And now that there's a sudden thing that's been invented called hurricanes hitting Florida, that the insurance prices have gone up. Same thing with California. California never had wildfires, all right, until recently because of climate change. And then all of a sudden, the insurance rate's going up. Now, I would argue with this particular one saying you're saying it's climate change, but could it actually be replacement costs? All right, costs it takes to actually build those houses now, especially with the new regulations. Okay, something else I was going to talk about, and we'll just dovetail right into this. I got bored and got on one of the AIs and started talking to the AI, because sometimes that's the best conversation I get that day. And the AI was running down a hypothesis, all right? And I said, can you estimate, all right, how much of an impact second homes and Airbnbs have on the price of home costs in any particular market? And it calculated out, did a pretty good job, at least my limited math skills and whatnot. And it said basically, for every 1% of houses that go from, to Airbnb or to a second home, you see, your rents increased by like $10 or something like that. It was an effect, but it was pretty insignificant, right? Blowing out one of my personal great theories, all right, cognitive dissonance. I love being wrong. All right, that I always thought that the second homes and the Airbnbs drove up house prices a lot more. Okay, so the AI said, nah, mathematically, it's just not there. It's an impact, but it's not as big as you think it is. So, looked around. Let's talk about zoning. All right, remember a couple weeks ago, we were talking about zoning and how it adds so much. So I had to calculate just the cost of zoning, and it came out to like $69,000 per house. All right. Your average house out there, new build, being built, $69,000 of that sticker price that you see is to deal with government bureaucracy. Either waiting for the permits, all right, having to build to the regulations. Now, I got an issue with that, okay? It's like, hey, sometimes you actually want to have good builders regulations going in. A true libertarian, a true free market capitalist would say, well, you just hire a home inspector. All right, and they'll tell you whether or not it's built to a code or a standard that can be set by a third party, and then the builders would have to build to that third party. It just wouldn't be the government. Okay, and that cost would obviously be offset on the builder or on the buyer. Okay, well, technically is already, but now you're waiting for some person from the city to come down and inspect your breaker box. So, anyways, I then took the number, okay, of how much it costs per house. And I said, if I was to write that into my loan, and into that loan, paid it off over 30 years at 6.5%, how much would that be a month? And it came out to $499. All right, so on a new build, whatever that price of, you're paying $2,500 for that new build out in Goodyear a month. Is your mortgage payment before taxes and insurance. All right, $500 of that is to pay for the city of Goodyear to allow them to build the house there and do the inspections and everything else. So if you're really looking at home affordability, right, it's not taxing the millionaires and the billionaires. Oh wait, I'm a millionaire. Taxing the billionaires. They got 5 houses, I only have 3. I can't do good impersonations anymore because everybody's so impersonable. It's like why I can't do any accent from the British Isles. All right, I tried to do an accent from the British Isles, including Ireland and stuff like that. You just like on a tour, sometimes in the same sentence. Anyways, so there we go. All right, big chunk, wanted to reduce that. It's the zoning. It's the NIMBYs. It's that. All right. In this particular case, insurance. How about the next slide? Policy works when you measure it. Okay. Housing policy stories were framed as ineffectual or harmful before 2015. Now some similar policy moves are now being told as success stories, right? Housing policy is improving affordability. Yes, in rentals. All right. A lot of this had to deal with the regulations and how to get in people mandating that more multi-use housing. All right. And that's how the articles have gone. So yes, rents, especially here, especially in Phoenix, I think we got the rent thing licked. Doesn't mean we're going to have a crash. We're not going to have a crash in rental rates or anything like that. All right. But what we do have is pretty much flat rents for the last 3 years. If your landlord raised your rent on you, you should have told them no and explained to them why they're going to say no. And then you sit there and say, you want me to pay an extra $50 a month? That's $600 a year. So instead of, which means you're going to lose $1,800 I'm paying right now. All right. So instead of making $1,800 and raise it to $1,850, we're going to continue to do $1,800. And you'll be happy with it because you will think you have lost $600, but in the month it takes you to get me in here, you won't even make it up in the rest of the lease. Practice that in the mirror and then drop it on your landlord. But why are you renting? Who the hell want to be renting right now? Sucker's game. All right. So where are we at? Next one. Tariffs hit McMansions before manufacturing. I love this chart. I loved this part of the article. All right. In 2020, construction material stories were framed around affordability and opportunity. Similar material costs now get told as a crisis narrative. Okay. Because of the tariffs. And yes, they're hitting the McMansions because upper middle class people and lower upper class people are more likely to import stuff to put into their house. The Italian granite, all right, that will be hit by a tariff as opposed to stuff made here in the States. Okay, so that might be going back when we were talking about those jobs that were impacted. The information, too fast, too furious. All right. All that other good stuff, you know, it's hitting them first. Like, oh my God, if I can't have Italian marble in my bathroom, I don't want a new bathroom. And I couldn't sell my house for $750, so we're going to take it off the market. All right. Interesting. Investment orthodoxy gets foreclosed. Home ownership stories before 2021 emphasized investment and wealth building. All right. Now they're emphasizing shelter over speculation. I'm actually really happy with that. Housing should not be thought of as an investment. Those articles have gone up. I agree with that. Housing is your biggest investment. All right. It is. Okay. Two things can be true at the same time. Okay. But you should not treat your home as an investment. Okay. But your home will probably be your biggest investment, which is why you should maintain it. So anyways, I will link this article in the show notes below because I really enjoyed it. And where does this leave you, the consumer? Well, if you're in a house, now's not a good time to sell it. If you're sitting there thinking, yeah, I would like to own, I just don't think I can. We're at the point. You just need to don't say no until Ray says no. All right. Or Jeff says no, or Pat says no, or any of the other lenders I can put you in contact with. I just got another lender sent me a whole package of stuff of all the different loan programs he has. It's like I can't get a loan because I don't have I don't have a W-2. I'm self-employed. Okay, they got those out there now. All right. I only have 1%, and I had to borrow that from my folks. We got that. All right. Yeah. Like I said, it is a no freaking brainer. I was literally trying to talk to one of my agents the other day. He wants to buy a house. he wants to use his VA loan to buy a house, and he's driving down to Casa Grande and then turning right and driving 10 miles out into the desert to show houses. All right. He's worked in Maricopa. He's all over that place. I'm like, dude, just move. And he's like, well, there's nothing to do down there. I'm like, good. It'll keep you out of trouble. Right? You'll be too busy getting rich selling houses down there and land. Right? And especially, you can really make some killer deals down there right now. If you have a job that travels, if you have a job that you can work from home, if you have a job on the south side of the valley, Maricopa, Santan, who, news came out this week, they just voted to become a town now, so their Santan area is now incorporating. All right, good for them. Welcome another layer of bureaucracy on top of your life, but they're so far, they're in Pinal County, and they're so far on the outskirts, and it's probably better for them in the long run. All right, good to go, guys. All right. Yeah. But other than that, if you were a seller, I would seriously take a look at whether or not you could rent that place out for a while, even with rents being as they are, especially if you have an interest rate that starts in a 2 or a 3, right? If you don't need the equity out of that house. But every person's situation is different. Okay. Don't listen to me when I say big generalities about you should do this, you should do that. Okay, and unless we're specific in a room and I've had you fill out forms for me and we've looked at paperwork and, we will look stuff. And then even then, in the back of your head, you got to remember, Ray's not a financial advisor. Ray's not an attorney. Ray's not a doctor. Ray's just a guy who watches children and pets around water, and you should too. Ray's a guy who only drives into flooded areas when he's being stupid or just has a really bad case of, well, this could be interesting. All right. Ray's the guy who works the circles. All right, and Ray's the guy who's wishing you guys have a very, very happy weekend. All right, talk to you guys later.